You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. And now, in Disney.
Well, there we are, friends. We got a good program for you guys tonight. We have got Roland, former Jehovah's Witness, coming in from the United Kingdom, and we got Chad from Illinois. Now, many people right now are leaving the Watchtower. Many don't want to leave the Watchtower. And the reason why they don't want to leave the Watchtower is because they know they're going to be shunned, that they could have a lot of repercussions come against them. So tonight, these two guys have taken the time, they've taken and studied exit strategy. What's a good exit strategy for leaving the Watchtower? Well, these guys are going to talk about it. Hello, Roland, and hello, Chad.
Hello, I'm from the UK. How's everybody doing?
Well, they're all doing good, Roland, and we always are good to hear from you. I know it's late over there, but we're going to be listening intently, so I'm going to cut out of the scene here, and I'll be stepping in if you guys need me, okay?
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Then take the program away. I'll be here, though. All right.
So, hi, how's it going, Chad?
It is going quite well, Roland, and it's good to see you again, my friend.
Yes, and you. Yes, likewise. Yes, I'm good, thank you. All going well here at the moment. So, yes, I can't complain at all. It's been pretty good just recently. So, yeah. I've been thinking about disfellowshipping and disassociating and all the things I went through before I disassociated and the thoughts I had, etc. You know, I don't think people quite realize the pressure that's put on you when you're on the verge of doing that. You know, if you've gone PMO for a while and you know you've decided it's time to leave, it's a lot of pressure. It's not just like leaving any company where you can just go and hand your notice in and that's it. You know, what people don't realize is that when you do that, you're effectively, you know, they're going to shun you. They're not going to speak to you. They're not going to have any contact with you. They're going to blacken your name as much as possible because they don't want people wondering why you left. So they're going to just try and blacken your name. And sometimes trying to get out of these without too much damage, it can be quite daunting, you know, and you don't have that support like other people do. You know, they might leave churches, but they've got family or they've got friends outside of the church, so they can get support off them when they leave. Because as a Jehovah's Witness, you're told to shun the world almost in a sense that you don't have anything to do with it. So you don't make friendships outside of the congregation as a rule. You know, not most Jehovah's Witnesses don't, not really, not good friends. And so, you know, you have no support network there. And, you know, people see these witnesses knocking on the door and they're promising you all this, that, and the other, paradise, earth, you know, the religion's lovely, everybody gets on. But the minute you challenge a Jehovah's Witness on the religion's treatment of disfellowshipped or disassociated former members, you'll typically be met with a response that goes something like, oh, well, we're doing it out of an act of loving kindness or loving discipline and our loyalty to God's command. And then they'll bring up scriptures, you know, that are completely out of context. I mean, First Deuteronomy 21, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And it says, and say this to the elders of the city, the son of ours is stubborn and rebellious, and he refuses to obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. See how they're straight away somebody that's disfellowshipped there, or somebody that's disassociated. They've associated it with a glutton and a drunkard. Well, this probably isn't the case at all. I mean, they may have just smoked a cigarette. They may have done something a couple of times that's minor, but, you know, they've been disfellowshipped for it. But perhaps it's just because the face didn't fit, you know. But carrying on from there, glutton and drunkard, then all the men of the city must stone him to death. So they're basically saying, oh, well, you know, spiritually you're put to death. So
Yeah.
this is the way we should treat these people, as if we would stone them to death. So you must remove what is bad from your midst, and all Israel will hear and become afraid. If a virgin is engaged to a man, and another man happens to meet her in the city and lies down with her, you should bring them both out of the gate of that city and stone them to death. Again, stoning to death there, very graphic scripture to use. The girl, because she did not scream in the city, and the man, because he humiliated his wife of his fellow man. So you must remove what is evil from you. So there, they're sort of, assuming that you've done something like, gluttony, or you're an alcoholic, or you're, basically an adulterer or something. But it could be anything, but nobody ever knows. They don't announce why you've left. But then, of course, they're using the law of Moses there. Well, I mean, are we these days then supposed to stone sinners to death? Is that what they're saying? I mean, we think that the law of Moses was nailed to the cross, and but that doesn't seem to apply to them. But we don't go on the law of Moses anymore, and that's exactly why we don't execute adulterers or rapists. But and then another one, 2 Matthew 10. I can keep this short, but 2 Matthew 10:34-37. Do not think I came to bring peace to the earth. I came to bring not peace, but a sword. For I came to cause division with man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Indeed, a man's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever has greater affection for the father or mother than for me is not worthy of me, and whoever has greater affection for son or daughter than for me is not worthy of me. So they'll use that one as well. So that's why we, cut them out, sort of, basically. But when you read that in context, that whole passage in context, it's clearly describing Jesus' followers being shunned by unbelieving family, not the other way round. It doesn't say anything about that. But there you go. That's just one or two. I think you thought about one in Corinthians, wasn't it? You said.
Yeah. In 1 Corinthians chapter 5, there's a guy who is sleeping with his stepmother, his father's wife. And the church at Corinth is rejoicing, in the grace of God, and it's being used as an opportunity by the unbelievers to mock the church. And in 1 Corinthians 5, Paul reminded them, listen, you're not supposed to keep company with fornicators, not necessarily the fornicators of the world, but those that are in the church. And then in the next, and it says to put away that wicked man, and continuing that thought, in the next chapter, in chapter 6, there's a laundry list of sins a person can be excommunicated for, including stealing, adultery, that kind of thing. And that would, call up for a shunning, but it's real interesting that if you read it within its context, these are gross, purposeful sins. These are not a person slipping up. This is something a person has done, and it is vile. It's not even something small. I mean, this is something with major moral repercussions. In fact, in one translation I used, it said something about a catamite, which is the old word for a child molester, a person who prefers prepubescent children for sexual objects. So, I mean, that kind of a person, if that happened within the church, yes, absolutely, that person should be shunned. But at the same time, in the very next book, in 2 Corinthians, that young man who was sleeping with his stepmother, he repented, and the church, and this is where the church was acting just like Jehovah's Witnesses. This man was sorry. He wanted to come back in, and the church was keeping him out And the Apostle Paul rebuked the church and said, if this man is sorry, welcome him back in.
Yeah.
But yet with the Jehovah's Witnesses, let's say you do something that is absolutely horrible. Let's say you do cheat on your wife with a girl who's, 13 years old, 12 years old. Okay. And the church finds out, yes, that person should be kicked out of the church. He should be made an example of. We don't tolerate this type of behavior. Now, this man reconciles with his wife. He does everything. He makes amends as best he can. He ends up going to jail, getting out, whatever, and he's truly penitent and sorry. Yeah, welcome him back in.
Yeah.
But with the Jehovah's Witnesses, that situation, oh no, he may have to sit in the back of the Kingdom Hall for a year or 2 years.
3 sometimes.
Disfellowship them. Yeah. Because as you know, in the Watchtower, they even say that child pornography is not necessarily something to be disfellowshipped for. Now, if you get drunk, you can be disfellowshipped, but if you molest a kid, you can't.
I know. It's hypocritical, and it's just totally outrageous, and they just pick and choose what laws they want to keep, and it also depends a lot on if your face fits as well. If you happen to be, an elder's pet, you're probably less likely to get disfellowshipped, than you would if you sort of wasn't part of the, if your face just didn't fit, which was sort of my case, really, But I mean, in reply to them, I would quote Matthew 5:4. Just one more scripture because we try and keep it short on a Saturday night. But First Matthew 5:43-48. You heard it. You heard that it was said, "You must love your neighbor and hate your enemy." However, I say to you, continue to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may prove yourselves sons of your Father who is in heaven, since he makes the sun rise on both the wicked and the good, and makes it rain on both the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those loving you, what reward do you have? Are not also tax collectors doing the same thing? And if you greet your brothers only, what extraordinary thing are you doing? Are not also the people of the nations doing the same thing? You must accordingly be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. So, I mean, quite clearly there he's saying have love for your enemies. So, don't be, it's very easy to love another Jehovah's Witness who's going to the meetings all the time and almost appears to be leading a perfect life. But, how is that benefiting those that are spiritually weak, if that's what they think they are? Well, surely it makes more sense to go out and find that, and help them and rather than just shunning them and saying, oh, look, you've gone against the governing body, you've gone against the elders, whatever, you're preaching apostate material. Why not just go and talk it over with them, get their thoughts before they start thinking about shunning people, or disfellowshipping. But the first thing you know about it is you're dragged into an elders judicial committee, and you sort of put on the spot because you've got 2 or 3 elders there, looking over you, and it's very difficult. And I've often thought to myself, getting onto the subject now, I've thought to myself, is it better to disassociate, or is it better to go in, be disfellowshipped, but stand your ground and cite why you're leaving? But then I thought, well, no, because nobody else knows why you leave. They know, but they won't tell anybody else in the congregation. So I think you've got some ideas, haven't you? So how to best? Well, we've been discussing it, haven't we, between each other over the earlier on today. So go ahead. Yeah.
And I think there is a list that you can make, and that's something. I come from a military family. My dad was in the Army. My stepdad was Marines. My stepbrother was Marines and then Army. My oldest brother was Army. My uncle was Air Force. My other uncle was Army. Both my grandfathers were Army. My great-grandfather was Army. It goes. Okay.
Yeah.
From a disciplined family. We have that military background, and everything comes down to having a plan. And it's like the old show, The A-Team, when Hannibal would say, I love it when a plan comes together. I think what's best is, especially if you're a PMO, you need to come up with a plan. No one goes to war without thinking of a plan. And people might ask right now, well, why would you consider this warfare? Because whether you're being disfellowshipped or you're disassociating, you are losing your family. You are losing your friends. You are losing the life that you've lived. And I think that's worth fighting for.
Oh, absolutely.
Worth fighting for. So my whole thing is make a plan. And the first thing you have to decide is, how do I want to go out? Dylan Thomas wrote a poem about death, and he said he was speaking, and it just went out of my mind. Anyway, he was talking in the poem about when he dies, he goes through with how he's going to die. And it brings up that you have a choice when you die, whether you're going to scream or go out fighting or just go out with a whimper, or if you're just going to shut up and hold your head high and take your comeuppance. But, I think if you're a PMO, what you need to do is make that decision. How are you going, or do you even want to leave? Do you want to leave, or do you want to risk disfellowshipping? Because if you leave, you have a choice to do it their way or your own way. A lot of people don't think of that, but it's true that there is your own way of doing it. And I came up with two really good ideas. And one is to write a short letter of disassociation, just like a person normally would. But instead of turning it over to the elders, and when I say short, I mean like 6 inches by 4 inches, and it would probably cost around $50 or $60, probably around 40 to $50 pounds UK. But take that into your newspaper and have that published in your newspaper, in the personals. Keep it very brief, very direct, very to the point, that you're leaving the Watchtower, you're disassociating, and mention the reasons why. Mention that the Watchtower is a false prophet. They've prophesied the end of the world several times. Give the years for that. The Australian Royal Commission and child sexual abuse is another good reason that you can put in there. The absolute control that they hold over you, your family, and your friends. And now that you are leaving, you are losing your family and friends, because they will no longer be allowed to talk to you. And then, those, and then just any personal reasons why you're leaving. Maybe it's because there's someone in the Kingdom Hall who's ripping you off. Maybe there's someone who's putting the moves on your spouse. Maybe you're being treated unethically, whatever. And if there's any other room left, you might want to put why you're putting it in the newspaper, that you refuse to go out the way they want you to, that you're going out on your own terms. And you want to expose the kind of evil, wretched behavior that the Watchtower acts upon and behaves with. And another way you could do this is take the time, write out a letter of disassociation. Take a week to write one, review it, rewrite it, but take a full week and make it as long or as short as you want. Make sure you provide documentation of everything that you say in that letter. So the false prophecies would be, one of the documentation. Some of the other teachings about the end, the end of the world, the return of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's so many, of their own publications. Use those publications. Get copies of them. You can get scans. I provide them, to whoever wants them. And print out your letter, even if it's 10 pages, and print out all the documentation that you can. And then, instead of handing it in to the elders at the Kingdom Hall, take it somewhere that makes copies. Have copies made for every single person in your congregation, and then take a drive around town in your area and drop them off at every congregant's house in the middle of the night, except for the elders and the ministerial servants. You see, they want you to turn it into the elders, or at least the ministerial servants, okay? But remember, you're not playing by their rules anymore. Oh, no. Roddy Piper once said, just when you think you've got all the answers, I go and change the questions. And that's what you're doing. You are flipping the script on them. So now, not only are they not going to know right away why you're leaving, but also the entire congregation is going to know exactly why you're leaving. And it's a beautiful opportunity to tell everyone how you actually feel about them as individuals, but only keep it positive. If there's someone you don't like, then don't say anything negative. But if there's 2 or 3 close friends you have, mention their names. Let it be known you appreciate their honesty, their friendship, and what they've meant to you as a human being, and how you love them, are going to miss them. But also, towards the end, make sure you let the people know that you want to keep the lines of communication open, and you will not ever disclose who in the congregation maintains communication with you.
Yeah.
Let it be known you will keep that confidential because you love them and you care about them, and you don't want to lose them. Now, here's the thing. That's
Go on, carry on. Sorry, no, carry on.
Yeah, that's going to upset the elders, especially if that ends up making its way to the circuit overseers. That's really not good. And in fact, you're probably going to get some letters about that. And my advice there is drop them a note. Any other communication you want with me, take it to my lawyer. And consult a lawyer. Lawyers give free consults. So if you consult a lawyer about everything going on, just tell them, hey, I just want to know what's going on. And at that point, you can say, you know what? Take it up with my attorney.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah.
Chase them off. They won't want anything to do with you after that.
No. I mean, I wish really I'd had all thought of this myself. When I handed in my disassociation letter, I decided to disassociate rather than wait to be, sort of kicked out, like, disfellowshipped. But I just thought for my own pride a bit, I thought, I'd rather strike first and not give them the satisfaction of saying they've done it to me, although the outcome will be the same. But for my own peace of mind as much as anything, I just wanted to get in there first, So I wrote them a handwritten letter to the elders for a start, and handed that into one of them, and then I emailed it. Oh, he emailed me. Well, no, he contacted my daughter. That was it. My daughter was still a Jehovah's Witness, but she wasn't going to the meetings. But he contacted her and asked if I would meet him. So I emailed him. I didn't meet him. I emailed him, and I sort of explained again. I went through why I disassociated, but this time I put a lot more information. I put, Watchtower, copies of Watchtowers that said the opposite to what they're saying now, talking about excommunication, things like that. I cited different kingdom ministries, and I went through a whole list of things why I thought they were wrong, and I separated it out. One was Christmas and birthdays, and then went into Scripture as to why they was wrong on that, and blood and various other things, that I just felt were scripturally wrong, and that they'd got scripturally wrong. He emailed me a couple of more times after that, and then I told him about my oldest daughter being abused, and he said that would be taken care of. It wasn't. And from there on, it was just a case of them shunning me. But to be honest, I know for a fact that they told the congregation, and the congregation knew I'd got bipolar disorder, but they told the congregation that I was dangerously deranged and that I'd lost my mind, which I hadn't. In fact, at that point, my mind was clearer than it had ever been. I had no depression. I wasn't, I was just completely clear-minded. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I couldn't stay any longer in that organization. And, and so I left, but thinking back now, I wish, I had put took out a bit in the paper, because, like I say, they'll never know unless I happen to bump into them. They dared to speak to me, which they won't. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So, now we've covered setting the tone of leaving, making that decision to leave. But another thing we need to talk about is preparing to leave, because this is going to be a huge emotional strain on you. This is something that's going to have a huge impact on your mental health. So I want to advise everyone some great steps you can take that are really going to be beneficial. And
go ahead.
This is just a list I threw together the other day. And first thing on my list, find 2 friends. Ideally, you want one of them to be a stronger, mature Christian, and one of them you want to be an atheist. The reason why you want these 2 is because these are 2 people, as a Jehovah's Witness, you were never allowed to be close friends with. So by having one of each, you're going to have a form of balance in your life. And you have to let them know you don't want to argue with them, but you need their support and their perspective on what's happened to you in life. So I think having those 2 friends or more, it is just an excellent, excellent step. Number 2, look for a counselor or a therapist. Get online, search around. Usually every city or county is going to have a place you can go for free, or whatever you can afford, whatever insurance you have, or whatever, they will be able to hook you up with some form of mental health counseling and therapy. And I would also recommend, if you go that route, get the book by Bonnie Zeman, Cracking the Cult Code for Therapists. You get yourself a copy of that book, because right now I'm going to tell you, the average therapist does not know anything about being in a cult. Just flat out. Bonnie Zeman was a Jehovah's Witness. She got out, she earned a PhD, she ended up writing this book as a help for therapists. I tell you, buy the book yourself, so when you start therapy, you can tell them, listen, this is what I've been through. Here's a book written by a PhD, and they explain how you can help me. and give them the book.
Yeah, it's a good
that
idea.
is really, really going to help.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea, because most therapists don't have a clue. I mean, unless they happen to have been in the organ, or maybe some of them have got sort of experience of other cults, but very few, to be fair. And what they do know is probably, come from other people whose experiences might have been a bit, they'll have been the same, but a lot of them may have been a bit different, and so therefore, unless you're in amongst it and can see the whole picture, you they don't really know. And I mean, I found that I sort of found that. Luckily, I come across a CBT therapist that did know a bit about it, and it really helped. But which I think you're going to discuss in a minute, aren't you? But as a rule, most of the doctors, most of the therapists didn't have a clue. Luckily, in Britain, it's free. It's on the NHS, so I didn't have to pay a penny for it. But and I actually went because I was having flashbacks of my son and wife in hospital, and I couldn't sleep and stuff, and I went there. But at that point, I was PMO as well, and so I did sort of mention that I thought the Jehovah's Witnesses were a factor in making it worse, and that the guilt trip that they give you and stuff is making, well, it was, it was making. I couldn't sort of get past the point of the guilt, and then of course it was causing flashbacks. So I went for that, but then of course I mentioned the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I said, that this was making it worse, and she'd had a bit of experience, of different, some JWs and other cults as well, and so that helped a bit, but of course she didn't know the whole ins and outs, but it did help a fair bit, I thought, and it cleared my mind to make the decision to leave the JWs, so yeah. So carry on.
Another thing I have down here, you just brought up CBT. For those who don't know, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. I recommend you get a book on cognitive behavioral therapy. A great one that's out, it was recommended to me by a psychiatrist, is Feeling Good. Feeling Good, or The New Feeling Good. It's by a man named David Burns. He's not related to me. I have no idea who this guy is. But it had a lot of really good stuff in there. Also, most of your, if you just do a Google search for CBT books, cognitive behavioral therapy books, you'll find workbooks up the wazoo. It's very popular. And it's not going to be a be-all, end-all, fix-all. But what it is going to do is it's going to help you to identify mental distortions so that you can learn how and what actual facts and truth is, because the Watchtower has lied to you, they've programmed you, they have done damage to you. So now you need to reset your mind, and you need to learn to think of things the way they actually are, and not the way the Watchtower has programmed you to think. So what you're going to be doing with CBT is kind of unprogramming yourself. Not deprogramming, but unprogramming. You're resetting yourself. Another idea I had is finding support groups. You're not going to find a ex-cult support group, but you might find a grief support group for people who have lost loved ones. And, if you have a family member that has died, that's an excellent excuse to go to one. And then you can also bring up how now you're being shunned, and you can kind of work that into the whole grief process you're going through with that lost friend or lost loved one. And you can bring up, in some ways, I wish my whole family were dead, because now I have to see them out and about, and we're not allowed any contact with each other. They're not allowed to contact me, and it just pains me to see them out and about. And that's something else that people need to think about, is finding a decent support group. Another idea I had, go get some Christian books on cults. Kingdom of the Cults by Walter Martin is the standard. It is the classic. The reason I say get the Christian books on cults is because it is going to work better to unprogram you than what some of the secular books are going to do. But also with something like Kingdom of the Cults, it's going to show you how religious programming works. And it's going to teach you how to recognize it. And it's just going to be a lot better because you're coming out of a cult. And if you don't believe that the Watchtower theologically is a cult, then that's even better, because Walter Martin in his book, he goes through the psychological structure of a cult. He goes through, defining terms, scaling the language barrier, and he goes through all this criteria. And then he gives a history of the Watchtower, because they're the first chapter on cults after the introductory chapters. They're the first cult he covers. That's 120 pages.
Yeah.
So,
I think a lot of the problem that JWs have, particularly ones that are either PMO or come out of it, like myself, actually, you can't really accept that you've been in a cult or that you are in a cult if you're in it, because a JW's idea of a cult is somebody like David Koresh or Matey Boy in Jonestown, and and they're all living in communes, and they're all completely crazy. They're all having sexual relationships with each other, and and that type of weird stuff, and that's what most JWs thinks is a cult, because that's what the governing body will make you think is a cult, because they don't want to point to the fact that the actual definition of a cult, if you go to the definition of a cult, pretty much the JW religion is there. And we didn't live in communes and stuff like that, but they had such control of us even when we was on our own at home, because you're always, you've always, we're Jehovah's watching, or and you knew if you was out in the town, you'd be very careful if you was thinking of, buying something that you perhaps shouldn't buy, because people were watching you. You don't know who's around the corner. So they've got eyes. You don't need to be in a commune, because they've got complete control of you anyway. They've got control of your thoughts. And once they've got control of your thoughts, that's it, I'm just thinking, does anybody want to come in and comment before we carry on?
Yeah.
Have we got any callers?
Anybody who wants to call in, the number is 727-731-6701. Hit *6 to unmute yourself and talk, and when you're done, you hit *6 again to mute yourself when you're done talking. Anybody want to call in, talk, comment, question?
Well, I'm going to be the icebreaker here. What you doing here tonight, guys? Okay, you can't do it there because they'll make a noise. Yeah, they're going to hear that. Yeah, come over, Dick. You can just stand right up. No one's going to see it. Just stand right up, and make a comment. Yeah. Okay, we do have someone coming in here. Hold on 1 second. Let's see you. Yeah, you just stand right there and just speak up. It'll pick up on you. Yep.
Hey, Chad and Roland, how you doing?
Hey.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I'm enjoying your program immensely. I just have a suggestion. When you talked about making copies of, the reasons for you leaving the Watchtower, it'd probably be a good time to do it. Go out to the parking lot just before the song and the closing prayer. Put those copies underneath the windshield wipers of cars, and I think you could get away with it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Yeah, that's another option. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and the whole thing is, make it flexible, get creative with it. You may want to drop a copy off at their house, and then on their car after services at the Kingdom Hall, and you may want to even get a hold of them in the middle of the week just to drop it off to them. You might want to do all three. Get creative with it.
Sorry, Dick, carry on.
Yeah, get creative with it, and don't play by their rules. Remember, you have played by their rules, and that brought you under slavery and a yoke of bondage. Now, the entire point, if you're a PMO and you're deciding, okay, it's time for me to leave, remember, now is the time for you to make them play by your rules as best you can. You no longer are under their authority. You're free to play dirty pool.
Yeah, I was just thinking about his comment a minute ago. He was saying put it under the windscreen wipers at the end of the meeting, or near enough to the end of the meeting. And that sort of it was in line with what you and I was saying earlier about dropping the bomb, wasn't it? Just, sort of acting, not sort of acting like PMO as if you couldn't care, but just, do everything. We were saying if you do everything properly and then suddenly just drop it on them when they're not least expecting it, and I think that takes them by surprise as well. It's always good to keep them on the toes.
Yeah, and that's what we would call a psychological operation or a psyop. And the classic example is the bombing of Pearl Harbor. There was a delegation from Japan that came to America. And this delegation, they were talking trade and all this other issues, and there was a lot of tension. We knew things were getting really bad, and it could even potentially lead to war. This delegation came in. They worked out a whole bunch of problems with the United States representatives and ambassadors. And then they were so happy to finally work this out like adults. And then they even made plans to get back together and further work on their issues. And they said that, they did not want war. They assured us of that. And not 48 hours after that delegation left, out of nowhere, the Zeros, that was the name of the Japanese fighters, the Zeros flew in with kamikaze pilots, and they shot to heck Pearl Harbor. And when they had no more ammo left, they crashed their planes into our ships. And here's the thing, there is a version of that you can do. And that is become the perfect Jehovah's Witness. Do not slack off in anything. Make yourself the example for the rest of the congregation. And here's why. They are always told, if you are going to leave, there's going to be signs of it. You're going to start slacking off. You're maybe going to skip every couple meetings. You can't do that with this. But because what you're doing is you're psychologically messing with them, because they think, well, you can always tell when someone's going to become apostate because they'll do this and they'll do that. And there's a whole pattern of behavior. Well, upset the apple cart. Become a perfect Jehovah's Witness. Get that zeal and that fire you had when you first got into the truth and become absolutely perfect. Make the elders ashamed of themselves if that's what you have to do. But do everything you can. And after a month, or actually I'd say 3 months, a quarter of a year, 3 months, all of a sudden, bam, take out that ad in the newspaper, run off those copies of a disassociation letter, the full ones with the documentation, and get it to the congregation, just not to the leadership. And all of a sudden, just boom, make it all happen in one single shot, one single day. It's a perfect ambush situation. And that, Pearl Harbor, we had no defense at Pearl Harbor. Right now, it's the same tactic. There's an old saying, a couple dozen fleas are not going to kill a dog, but they can drive that dog absolutely crazy. So think of yourself as a flea and the Watchtower is a dog, you know, a few dozen fleas is not going to necessarily kill a dog. Most of the time, I mean, it's not going to kill a dog. It's going to drive it absolutely crazy with itching and stuff like that. So here's the thing. Don't worry about being a pipe bomb that's going to just destroy and annihilate the Watchtower. Become a flea. Become a thorn in its side and a thorn in its paw. That's the whole thing. But like I said, you need to make the decision if this is what you want to do. Do you want to fade away? Do you want to be disfellowshipped? Do you want to leave of your own accord? And if you leave of your own accord, how are you going to do it? And if, like I said, this is a huge decision. This takes an absolute commitment. If you're absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt done, and there's no possible way you are ever going back, and you want to rattle their cages, this is how to do it. I mean, I am giving people the best possible advice I know how. And if anyone wants to talk more about this, you can email me, masterslanterns@gmail.com. And two other pieces of advice, well, a few others. Get involved in the XJW community on Facebook. There is a lot of unity with the XJW community. They may not be uniform, they may not have uniformity, but they do have unity in that community. That's a tongue
they
twister.
certainly do. I mean, that was the thing that helped me when I first sort of left. I mean, to be honest, I was very dubious about going on any of them because, I just assumed that it would all be, apostates, and they'd be sort of pouncing on me to get me out. And it wasn't like that at all, really. There was very loving, there was very, concerned, and though most of them I've never met face to face, I sort of feel now like I've known them all my life. They're always very supportive if I'm ill. And they helped me a lot because there was a lot of things I was feeling guilty about, like the blood issue and stuff like that, because I'd let the wife have blood, and a lot of them sort of made me see it from a different point of view. And the first one I went on was Help Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's run by she was known as Sally Peterson then, but it's Sabrina, isn't it? And she's been absolutely fantastic. She's been a wonderful help, and she's PMs me at times if I'm struggling, and then there's others on there that's helped, so you'll find they're very supportive, very, very supportive. But you just need to dare look. That's the thing, forget the JW, whether they're all apostates or all evil. No, they're not. All those on there, I think, pretty much are born again Christians, but some of them aren't. Some of them haven't got religion, but they're still very nice people. You know what I mean? So very supportive, and you'll find that we it's almost like a brotherhood, but there is no sort of, there's no stress with it. There's no being forced into it. You just naturally. They just naturally look after each other, so and so yes, I'd highly recommend that.
Another one is if you don't think that you have been programmed to think a certain way, get the book When Prophecy Fails by Leon Festinger. This was a man, he was a sociologist, PhD. And what he did was the Watchtower was prophesying the end of the world for the third, fourth, fifth time, whatever it was. He decided he wanted an insider's view. So he, quote unquote, joined the Watchtower, and he became a baptized Jehovah's Witness. So he did this before the end came, and he was making notes the whole time. And, he had the observation before the prophecy failed, when the prophecy was about to fail, when the prophecy did fail, and the fallout. And what this book actually does is it shows how the phrase cognitive dissonance came into being. And I don't want to, don't think this is a negative thought, because it's not negative, it's an observation. All JWs and all XJWs are programmed to be cognitive dissonant. That's just an observation. And here's the thing, that I refer to cognitive dissonance as the JW disease, because the Watchtower programs you to have that thought. One final thing I came up with is there's a workbook out called The Fallacy Detective. It's great for high schoolers, college kids, whatever. It teaches you the foundation of logic. The Watchtower always relies upon quote unquote reason and logic, but it's always illogical and unreasonable. In reality, their reason is totally illogical. By getting that workbook, The Fallacy Detective, and going through it, you will learn what logical fallacies are, how to identify them, how to communicate what's wrong with them, how to correct them. By doing that, once again, you're going to be resetting your mind. You're going to be unprogramming yourself from the way the Watchtower has showed you to think. But that when prophecy fails, that is going to show you that, yes, indeed, you were programmed, you were brainwashed. You may not think you were, but you were, and that book is going to prove it. So that is, that's where I think that is, Other than that, just to prove to yourself that the Watchtower has lied to you, go on YouTube, and don't do it as something you're going to commit to. Don't think you're going to be joining, but just watch a few full church services from a few different churches that are on YouTube. The reason I say that is because the Watchtower will probably have told you numerous things about Christian churches that are just blatant lies. And to convince yourself of the Watchtower actually lying to you, you can then find out the truth by observing, making notes of what an actual church is like compared to what the Watchtower says they're like. So think of that as a science.
Absolutely. It is a fear, because I mean, again, when I left, I had no intention of going in any church, because although I didn't believe that the JWs were the true religion, I still believed what they said about the other churches practicing idolatry and various other things, and unscriptural teachings. And it wasn't until I started looking around and talking to different, I spoke to different pastors and priests and stuff, that I realised that these people weren't, what the Watchtower were portraying them to be, and there are religions that are very sort of into idolatry and worshipping statues and stuff like that, and bending before crosses and crucifixes and stuff, but that's certain churches. It's not all churches, and the church I go to, it's very down to earth. There's no airs and graces. Everybody, it's a lovely congregation. They all help each other. They've all got time for you, and there's no weirdness in it. Nobody's dancing around with rattlesnakes or doing other weird things. Some Christians want people to be speaking in tongues. You won't get much of that in our church, but some JWs would feel uncomfortable with that, as I would have done, but and still would to a certain extent. But even so, you've got to try these things, even if you've lost your faith in God. then still try them, just so you can see how much the Watchtower was lying to you, how much the governing body was basically, it was all nonsense, or a lot of it was nonsense, Sometimes they'll add enough truth into, they'll put the truth into a great big pot of lie, and it's just to give it a bit of flavouring of truth. But that's how they work, you see. So, so some things they say about the church might be true. There might be certain churches that do that, but not all churches. And that's what you've got to realise. And you've got to go out there, and if you are wanting to find God again, which I'd hope most would, but if they do, then go and don't jump for the first church that you come to. Just go and have a look round, see what you think. Get a feel for it, start questioning a bit, go up to the pastor, question them. You know what I mean? If they've got nothing to hide, they won't mind answering you. And that's the difference between them and the Watchtower. Has anybody got any comments? I'm just thinking time's pushing on here. So
yeah, we got about 15 minutes left. Anybody else want to chime in and give comments, questions, concerns? Please.
Yeah, if you agree or disagree, or got any further advice.
I'm gonna come on here, Chad and Roland. Really, you put a lot of work into the program here tonight, and really, there's a lot of people who listen in, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to leave the Watchtower. So what you're doing here is you're giving. I hope people are taking notes. If people are trying to leave the Watchtower, you gave some really good advice, and because a lot of people, they're up in arms. They have no idea even how to go about it. So you gave some information tonight that could be very, very helpful. Good guys, good research. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thanks, Rick.
Oh, thanks for giving us the platform, because this is something I'm definitely passionate about. And Roland just brought up, it's okay to question things. In fact, one of my mentors, numerous times, he would hold up his Bible and he'd say, I don't have a right to believe anything I can't prove by this book. And he would encourage us to question him and to disagree with him even. And it was amazing, because there was a lot of stuff we did disagree over, but we were still friends. We still had that fellowship. You don't get that Watchtower.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sometimes have disagreements with the pastor at my church. I mean, we're best of friends, and he's a really lovely guy, and he's helped me out no end. But on certain things, I sometimes disagree, but he's fine with that. We don't fall out. He'll explain his side of things, I'll explain mine, and sometimes we have to agree to disagree. And he's fine. We're still, the next day we're still going out, doing stuff together and whatever, or we're. There's no bad feeling, and he likes people to sort of push him a bit sometimes, and so do I. I like to have debate, because it's it either strengthens your own mind, your own thoughts, your own belief, or you sort of see their point of view, and it can have a profound effect on what you believe, but also can have a profound effect on your life, So I think it's good to question, and I'm quite happy for people to question me, and I'm quite happy, and most pastors are quite happy if they're genuine people, so that you can question them. So by all means, go out there, question them, take time, just go up to them and say, can have a word. If they can't do it there and then, they'll make time for you at some point. They'll make an appointment or something. So most of them are just willing and longing to help you most of the time, so yeah. So, and most of them are fairly patient, I've found as well, which was a surprise, so yeah.
And I think that's another thing with the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're used to having to agree with authority figures, and learning to just amicably disagree is so good. It's so freeing, and it's so helpful, because you're learning, wow, I can disagree with this person. They're not going to hate me just because I disagree with them. And it's very liberating when that happens.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
this whole thing is about is liberating and being freed from the slavery and the bondage of the Watchtower.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. There is a freedom. I mean, once you get out, I mean, it's like, for me, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It was like a millstone lifted off my shoulders, It was just such a sudden relief. The thing is, I could have just stayed. Well, I could have just stayed inactive for a while longer, but I just thought to myself, well, you're never going to get closure, because even then, while I was inactive, I think the last year before I actually handed my notice in, I did sort of have a Christmas tree up, and because my daughter was living here, I think at the time, and. So we had it up for the child, but I felt I put it out of the way. I didn't put it in the window or anything like that. And my window's right on the main road. You have to pass my house to get in and out of town. So, and it's right sort of onto the pavement almost. The window, you can see, you can see it quite clearly. And I didn't. I just sort of kept it out of the way, and I kept the curtains closed so they couldn't see the lights and stuff like that. Even though, in my mind, I was going to leave anyway, but I just didn't want to. Provoke anything at that point. And so I was still feeling a bit guilty about it as well, And anyway, after I'd handed my notice in, I put my Christmas tree up in the window the next year, and I felt great. I got the biggest tree I could possibly get in it, filled it with lights, lights all around the window, big Merry Christmas thing outside my house, so when they went past, they could see it, So, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was just like a massive relief, and that's the thing, and it is difficult if you got family. I can understand that. Luckily, my daughter was already she was inactive, and she's never gone back since. But, so I didn't have, I mean, she did say to me, do you think you're doing the right thing? I think you should stay. After I'd explained to her why I couldn't, she accepted it, and now she accepts that I've done the right thing. I mean, she came to my baptism at the church, and she came to the Christmas carol services and stuff like that. So, so it's all worked out all right for me. But I can understand that other people who have got family in it, daughters, mothers, fathers, etc., especially if they've got all the family in it, then I can imagine it would be very difficult. So you've got to think these things through before you do it. You've got to imagine, can I really take it? Do I believe in God more? If you are Christian still, and if you still got a thought for God, do I believe in God more than sort of just staying in the congregation and going through the motions to be with my family? You've got to think this through, because it is hard once you've left. And I know people have been destroyed by not having their family, but they've left, and then a bit later on, down the line, they've either been pressured to go back and have to grovel, or they've ended up committing suicide or something. So you've got to really think it through. But if you're PMO and your mind's set, then there's nothing really. To stay there would be just a lie to them as well, anyway. So. You're better off making that decision, getting out, but think about it thoroughly before you do it. Don't just rush into it.
Roland, we had someone wanting to come in and talk to you. So go ahead.
All right. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Cool. Go ahead.
Hi, gentlemen. This is Apostle Dave, Linda James, and
hi, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. When you suggested to turn on YouTube and watch, different churches and stuff like that. I just want to suggest Dr. Charles Stanley. I really enjoyed listening to him. Very easygoing, very clear. He's got a very good demeanor to him. So Dr. Charles Stanley,
very loving man,
to check out, and it's good to do this because it's part of desensitizing yourself from how the organization has built phobia indoctrination in us. We were trained that there's demons flying around in every other church, but the more you get a chance to check out different churches, you'll have anxiety at first, but eventually it will go away the more you do it.
Yep.
And you'll see that it's not that. This was a lie. The demons is a lie. It's fear indoctrination.
Yeah.
It's supposed to make you scared. But Dr. Charles Stanley is a very easygoing, good person to listen to, easy to listen to. So that's my suggestion on someone to try on YouTube. So yeah.
No, thanks for that. Yeah, good advice. Yeah, I hadn't heard of him myself, but yeah, I'll look that up.
He's the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention back like 30 years ago, 40 years ago or something. But yeah, if you want to hear something really good, go to YouTube, type in John MacArthur, Jehovah's Witnesses. He just lays into them like it's nobody's business. And he just uses the Bible and common sense, and he just destroys them. It's great to watch. Very liberating.
Yeah, any subject he decides to take on, he lays into them. That's his style.
Yeah, he does.
Okay, so thank you, gentlemen. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you, Linda. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So yeah, anybody else want to tell us, what was your experience when you left the Watchtower? Did you choose to fade? Were you disfellowshipped? Were you one of these people who just disassociated? What was your story? What happened with you? We'd like to know. So anybody who wants to call in, the number is 727-731-6701. Once you call in, you hit *6.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to mention it is really hard to leave Jehovah's Witnesses, and people who do are brave. They might not think they're brave. They may think they're chicken because they're disfellowshipped or whatever, but it's not. You're very brave, and it's very difficult to leave the witnesses because you're not taught to think for yourself, as you said. So in order to even make a decision about who to listen to out of the myriads of people that are on YouTube or on the internet or television or anything, it's just information overload. And I know myself, I had a really hard time thinking for myself. Because you're not taught to think for yourself in the Watchtower, at least critically. So with Jehovah's Witnesses, everything's black or white. It's either all right or all wrong. There's no middle ground. So when you leave, you almost need a middle ground because you don't know what to think. And it takes a while to learn how to think even. And you're just in shock when you leave. Disfellowshipped or not, you're still in shock. And sometimes I know myself, I bounced back and forth. Wanted to be in, I didn't want to be in. I wanted to be in, then they disfellowshipped me, then I didn't want to be in. You know, it was just this vicious cycle. So just make a decision, and if you know it's right, stick with it. And just hang on to that decision till you're proven wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And the thing about if you stay in, you know, as a PMO, your life is going to be miserable because you know it's a lie in your own mind, and you can't ever settle because you can't take the risk of upsetting them because you don't want to lose your family or your friends or whatever it is that you don't want to lose. Or your own life is going to be miserable, and you know you're not going to have the life that you're wanting, even though you don't believe that organization is going to get you anywhere. You know, it's certainly not going to get you eternal life, you know, and you get to the point where you know that. But if you stay in and you just go through the motions just simply because of your family, well, then, you know, you've just, you know, you're going to send your own mental health into meltdown, you know, and that's, I mean, I've seen it happen a few times, you know, people who I've known that they've not been fully into, you know, the religion. They've not, you know, they've started missing, going on ministry and started missing meetings and stuff, but they kept in because the family was in it, and they kept coming out occasionally when the CO was there to look the part. But eventually they've either ended up having a mental breakdown or they've ended up, you know, committing suicide. I mean, one lad in our congregation, well, it was after I left, but he was PMO, and he you know, he kept missing meetings, and eventually he ended up hanging himself. And that's, you know, because he was under so much pressure. He didn't want to be in that life, but at the same time he didn't want to lose his family either, and they would have, you know, they would have shunned him because there was a particularly strict group, and you know, yeah, so his sisters were all pioneers and special pioneers, and you know, so there was a lot of pressure there for him to stay, but he didn't want to stay. You know, he wanted a different life. So I would advise that, you know, even though I said think about it before you do it, you know, but think ahead. But also, you know, I wouldn't suggest staying there forever. I just think you need to think it through a bit and make a plan of action before you do. So
Absolutely.
and just consider all the options and everything that's possible, you know, or is going to happen afterwards. So, you know, like we said, your friendship group, you know, make that up. At least you've got somebody then to go and, you know, maybe cry on the shoulder or something, you know, and you will find when you leave, because I was very spiritually mixed up. I love God. I knew I still believed in God, but I didn't believe in that religion. But the trouble was, I didn't believe in going to other churches either, because I thought they were probably just as bad or worse in some respect, you know, and I didn't want to walk into some weird, you know, pantomime of a church, you know, where all sorts of things are happening, and, you know, there's a lot of happy clapping and stuff like that, you know, because as a Jehovah's Witness, you're not used to that, you know, that happy clappy sort of, everything's dead silent in the kingdom, or less people are answering up. I mean, the kids are even taken out the back if they make as much as a whimper. You know, and I, you know, so most Jehovah's Witnesses, I wouldn't imagine, would like sort of going into a church where it's all people shouting out, and, you know, I did go into one of them churches and I found it very daunting, you know. So, but yeah, so that's really all. You know, I think we're running out of time here, so we're about a minute to midnight, I think. So well, at my time anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are we doing, Rick?
Roland, you got another 6.5 minutes.
All right, that's great stuff. Right. Have we got any more comments? Any more callers? Use the last 6 minutes. We won't bite.
Hi, Roland, Chad. This is Dick Borgie.
Yeah.
A question.
Oh, hi, Dick.
How we all doing? You're doing a good program. Loving it.
Thank you.
What would you recommend for someone who wanted to just fade out and didn't want to go through what you were talking about earlier in the program? They just want to fade out. What's the best way to do it?
I think a lot of the stuff I came up with applies. And that is like the mental health stuff, the cognitive behavioral therapy, the book When Prophecy Fails by Leon Festinger, a copy of Kingdom of the Cults by Walter Martin. You know, a little bit that just those things are going to go a long way in helping you to recover. And that's another thing, because when you leave, you are starting a process of recovery. And that process may last months, or it may last years, it may last the rest of your life, but that's okay. And I also want to say, if anybody needs any of the documentation, get a hold of me, drop me an email. I have scans from Watchtower publications from the 1800s. Any of the books that I mentioned on tonight's program, I have PDF copies of them. So I mean, I can just email them to you if that's going to help you. And that's my goal. I want to help people, and however I can help them, I'm there for them. So,
I would say as well, my daughter's sort of just faded out. She never disassociated, but what she's done, she's moved down the south of the country. She's gone about 300 mile away from where I am, roughly. So, you know, so doesn't know anybody down there. She doesn't know any Jehovah's Witnesses down there. And so basically she hasn't handed a disassociation letter in, but, you know, essentially she's gone, you know, and nobody's going to know her down there. She's never going to admit to being a JW if any turn up at her door. So there is that possibility that if you're thinking of moving as well, that's an easy thing. The only trouble I would say with fading out, if you stay in the same place, the same town, is even if you fade out, if you don't hand your disassociation letter in, or you disfellowshipping, or you don't get disfellowshipped, you're still under their rules. And if somebody happens to spot you doing something, you'll still have to go through that process. They'll call you. I mean, you don't have to go, but they'll still disfellowship you, won't they? So, you know, or whatever. But, you know, so and I think if you sort of just fading out, you haven't got any closure of myself. Not unless you've done like my daughter who has moved and nobody knows her, so she's not really worried, you know. But if she was here, she was worried. She was always worried about them seeing her doing whatever, you know. And even though I'd long gone, you know, and she was living with me, I was an apostate. She could have got disfellowship for that, but nobody seemed to notice. And so, but then you see, she kept bumping into them. She would speak to them, and she would find things out from them and stuff, so she could report back to me. But then, you know, she'd had enough of them, and she had a bit of a go at them one night. She went out, and they sort of turned her back on her, and she hadn't been disfellowshipped or anything. She hadn't dissociated, so she went up and had a go at them and said, you know, who are you judging me? You know, and so, and then not long after that, she'd moved down south. So, you know, she hasn't got an issue really. So, I mean, that's a possibility. If you're thinking of moving anyway, then do it then when you move. You know, just cut all contact, and, you know, and just don't give them any corresponding phone numbers or whatever. And if your family happens to be up here, well, just play along for a bit, you know, and, you know, you can talk about, you don't have to say about going to a Kingdom Hall, but just talk about Jehovah if you want to, just to keep them off the scent, and just perhaps do it that way. I don't, you know, that's all I could really say on that. But
and I do have, because we're getting ready to go off the air and everything, I do have 3 things you should not do.
Oh, yes, go on,
you
Chad.
should not do. Number 1, do not go and get yourself a bottle of epoxy or super glue and stick it in the door locks of the Kingdom Hall, so that, you know, don't do that. That's very childish and immature. Don't do
Funny,
that.
but immature, yeah.
Yeah. Number 2, do not go to Amazon and spend the $7.47 on a bumper sticker that says "Cowboy Butts drives me nuts" and stick it on the rear end of an elder's car. Childish.
Yeah.
Funny, but childish.
Yeah, immature.
Number 3, very immature and childish. Number 3, do not get a subscription to a gay porn magazine and have it in the name of the elder delivered to the elder's house or Kingdom Hall or work. That is all just bad stuff. Don't do any of those things.
Yeah, and I'd also say, if you are called to a disfellowshipping meeting, I watched a video today very quickly, and he admitted that he lied to them about some stuff that was on his YouTube. Don't lie to them, because then they'll tar every apostate, every person that leaves the same. We're all liars, you know, we're all taken by Satan, the father of the lie. And if they catch you out on something like that, it just proves their point, you know, and then you've got no defense. If you know in your own heart that you've told them the whole truth, you told them why they're leaving, why you're leaving, even if, you know, you disagree with your religion, whatever it is, tell them the truth. Don't tell them anything that's a lie, because then you've got the upper, you know, you've got the peace of mind that you know, whatever they say, then if they try saying blackening your name or trying to call you whatever, you know in your own mind that they're the ones that are lying. So, you know, and I think you should just have the upper hand and the be the better person. So, yeah, that's all I got to say. So, if there's anything else, I shall say good night and God bless everybody in America and all over the world. And we look forward to talking in 2 weeks' time.
Yes, good night, everyone. This is Chad Burns for Roland Smith. This is Returning the Light. We hope you've enjoyed the program. If you want to make contact, just drop me an email, masterslanterns@gmail.com. We love you. God bless you. Good night. Next up is JW World News. Stay tuned.
Well, thank you very much, Roland and Chad. You guys did a great job. Lots of research you guys did. Really appreciate you doing that. So you guys keep up the good work, and we'll be seeing in 2 weeks. And of course, we'll be seeing Chad next week on his Sunday program, Theology Matters. So we're looking forward to that. Well, you guys have a good one. Roland, you get to bed. What time is it over there in England?
It's just gone 8 minutes past midnight.
Well, you just sit there and relax, and maybe you can listen into some of the rest of the program. Thank you.
I'll be listening for a bit tonight, Rick. Yeah.
Thank you guys very much. We're going to disconnect now. So ending. Now, listen, if you're listening in on YouTube, if you're listening in on our radio network, and if you're listening on Facebook, don't worry. We'll be back in just a few minutes with JW World News. So if you're leaving that broadcast now, come on right back in. We just got to pump up a few little sound clips and what have you. But anyways, we're going to disconnect this program. We'll be right back on YouTube.